everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Feingold. This is the weekly lecture that we do every Wednesday. Sponsored lecture. The sponsor has decided to remain anonymous, which is 50-50. Or there's some guy named Anonymous, like Ted Danson, who's sponsoring all the lectures. I don't know. But Ted Danson can afford it. So, anyway, tonight's lecture series is going to add to great players of the present. And our subject today is 24-year-old Iranian GM Parham Maghsoodloo. And he's been the best player in Iran for a long time. And Iran does really well in the world youth and world juniors and stuff like that. So they have a lot of good up-and-coming players. Parham Maghsoodloo has a very small Wikipedia article, which is shameful. Typically, I like Wikipedia articles because they give you the information, and then if the information's wrong, people can change it. Or if it's right, people can change it to be wrong. So that's also confusing. But anyway, Parham Maghsoodloo has spent a couple of years being over 2,700 FIDE, which very few people can say. And he isn't over 2,700 FIDE now, but he's close, 2,677. And his peak rating in 2023 was 2,742, which made him number 12 in the world. Somebody number 12 in the world less than 2 years ago shouldn't have like a 3-paragraph Wikipedia article. They should talk more about his career. But I guess he doesn't have a good PR guy. Anyway, he became a grandmaster in 2016. So I have to try to do some math. So that was 9 years ago, because this is 2025. And he's 24. So that sounds like he was either 15 or 16 when he became a grandmaster. Already he should have a bigger Wikipedia article. Also, he did something else that's rare. He won the World Junior Championship. And not only did he win, he did something that's very rare. He won with a round to go. It's an 11-round tournament, and after 10 rounds, he won. It didn't matter how he did his last round. And he got 9.5 out of 11, which is crazy, because those are the best juniors in the world. And he came a point ahead of second. And his performance rating was 28-23. Wow. And this was 7 years ago that he did this. So he was 17 or 18 when he's getting a 2,800 FIDE performance. So again, his Wikipedia article is absurdly short. And it's not Nigel Short. Nigel Short's is long, and he's tall. Anyway, Maghsoodloo is the 3-time Iranian national champion. And I would guess if I was a betting man, I don't know for a fact, so you guys can fact check me by doing a lot of research. Good luck. I'm guessing he's 3-time Iranian champion because he doesn't play every year in the Iranian championship. I think if he played every year for the last 10 years, he would be like 6-time Iranian champion. So I'm guessing the tournament might not be strong enough for him to play in every year because he's so good. So risk your rating when you're playing low-rated players. Okay, then there's something in the article that shouldn't be in the article. It talks about a random tournament he had where he got +1. What? Okay, so somebody needs to add to his Wikipedia article, and hopefully one of the viewers on YouTube can do it and put accurate information, because it's absurdly small. Now, I'm a grandmaster, sort of, and I've seen a lot of Maghsoodloo games, and he's a wild and crazy guy. So basically, I'm surprised when Maghsoodloo draws. Okay, Maghsoodloo plays very enterprising chess, lots of calculation, lots of complications. Most of his games are too complicated for me. I can't calculate the number of variations he does. You know, he's young and strong. And so a lot of the moves he makes are surprising. And typically, for class players and lower rated players, you guys are afraid. So let's say you're 1400 and you go to a tournament and your opponent's 1800 and you're like, no. And then sometimes as a consequence of you not liking playing people who are 300, 400, 500, 600 points higher than you, you play too timidly. You're afraid. You're trying not to blunder. You're trying not to leave big weaknesses, trying to play solid. Okay, Maghsoodloo doesn't do that. Okay, if he's playing an engine, he plays like a maniac. That's how he plays. Okay, so if you want to have a favorite player because of their style, this is a good choice. Okay, and I looked at these games before today, and I don't know, I know he won, but super complicated. Okay, and not only that, I didn't want to pick any games where he beat some slouches. I didn't want Maghsoodloo beating up on a 2400 FIDE. I mean, I'm 2400 FIDE. Terrible. Okay, so typically, if you follow chess a lot, you'll have heard of the opponents in this lecture. First opponent you have heard of, unless you don't know anything about chess, you've somehow stumbled upon my channel. He's playing Vishwanathan, and this was in the online chess Olympiad during COVID. So they had the Olympiad online, and Maghsoodloo was black against Anand. So this is India versus Iran, obviously. Iran has grandmasters, so I don't know how they did in the match, but this was in 2020, 5 years ago, and this is the end of Anand's Olympiad career. Anand's played in many Olympiads, but now he's old like me, so now he's a coach and travels around and says, I'm Anand, and they're like, wow, okay. You can't even imagine how famous Anand is in India. God damn. Okay, so Anand's white and plays e4, and Anand is booked to the teeth. And there's two reasons Anand is booked to the teeth. And one of them you know, one of them you don't know. There's something called chess base, which most of you have heard of. And the originator of chess base was Frederick Friedel in the late 1980s, early 1990s in Germany. And Anand just like hung out with him and learned chess base. So chess base and all of its features, as it was becoming popular, was introduced to Anand by the creator, and he was there all the time learning how to use chess base. So when I use chess base, there's about 10,000 features you can use, and I use like 4 of them. Okay, the ones that I know. And I know them pretty well. Like, I'm showing you a game. I put black on the bottom. That's pretty good. Okay, but Anand can do like magic tricks with chess base. So he knows chess base really well. As a consequence of Anand knowing chess base very well, Anand's really good in the opening. Okay, you probably didn't know that like when chess base started, Anand was on the ground floor, becoming like the first grandmaster to endorse it and use it all the time. The other thing is that Anand has played 1 billion World Chess Championship matches. When you play a World Championship match, you do lots of preparation for months. And 95% of your preparation or more doesn't happen in the match. You're prepared for stuff, then it doesn't happen. And they only play 12 or 16 games. So if you're preparing hundreds or thousands of lines, they can't all happen anyway. So what happens is, over the next few years, or in this instance, decades, Anand has all this theoretical knowledge from preparing all of his world championship matches, and a lot of it he hasn't used. A very good example of this is the famous Aronian Anand game, which was part of his preparation for world championship match, I think against Gelfand, which makes sense because Gelfand was 2012 and Anand's famous win against Aronian is 2013. And in the game against Aronian, he used his Gelfand preparation, which didn't happen in the Gelfand match, and he beat Aronian with black in 23 moves, okay, which people don't do. Okay, so Anand's really good in the opening. And so Maghsoodloo, of course, plays the sharpest opening with the most complications because that's what Maghsoodloo does. Okay, so they play open Sicilian. And now, if I said black played a book move here, but don't try this at home, then that's what Maghsoodloo did. The book moves in this position are e6, knight f6, and g6. And if I showed you 100 Grandmaster games, between 90 and 95 one of those three moves would be played. Okay, Maghsoodloo played the sharpest move, which is very risky. And sharp and very risky, that's Maghsoodloo's middle name. So if you're playing him in a tournament and you write Parham, sharp and risky Maghsoodloo, your flag might fall. That's a lot of words. He played the move e5. Generally, chess coaches don't like moves like this. That's the most aggressive move that kicks the knight out of the center. Kalashnikov variation. Okay, knight b5. White would probably play knight d6 check. Next move if it was legal. So Maghsoodloo makes it very bad. Defends d6. c4, which is explosive. That's the positional move that guarantees white a slight edge by controlling d5 and having a bind on the position. Bishop e6, Maghsoodloo develops a piece. Knight c3, a6, knight a3. And what white wants to do, if he can cheat, is keep moving his knight until it gets to d5. And then he's got two knights, one for each of you. Okay, now, typically what black does here is plays knight f6, bishop e7, castles, and black is slightly worse because his d-pawn is very weak. But Maghsoodloo played more enterprisingly. He played g6. So he wants to fianchetto his bishop and try to play f5 later, get counterplay that way. It's risky to fianchetto your bishop because Maghsoodloo plays risky, because your d-pawn becomes even weaker when your bishop's not on e7. Bishop's on g7, sometimes you lose your d-pawn. And I have to let you know, before we do any more of the lecture, losing material isn't something Maghsoodloo cares about too much. So you're going to see a lot of sacrificing in the 4 games that I've prepared for you guys. Okay, knight c2. Anand is doing what I said. Bishop g7. Played bishop e3 instead of knight e3. Just developing his bishop. Probably, since Maghsoodloo fianchettoed his bishop, maybe Anand wants to double up on the bubble up on the d file and attack the d pawn. So that's why he played bishop e3. Plays knight e3 as bishop on c1's no good. Knight f6. Bishop e2. Rook c8. Anand plays b3. Anand usually plays the most solid. Castles, castles. So I'm a grandmaster, so I'm required to like white here because black has a weakness on d6, and I don't see anything weak in white's position. If you said, what can black attack? I don't know. I got no answer for you. Okay, but black has a grip on the center. Black has all these pieces in the center. So black is controlling all 4 center squares black's fighting for the center, and so it's considered double-edged and complicated. Okay, Maghsoodloo played b5 because that sacrifices a pawn, and that's how Maghsoodloo plays. He doesn't play for a draw. And what Maghsoodloo wants to do is eliminate the c4 pawn so he can play d5 later. And obviously, I know Maghsoodloo likes to sacrifice, but d5 is going too far. You can't play d5. Okay. But b5 you can play. And if you're Anand, you don't want like pawn takes, and white has two isolated pawns. Probably see very little reason not to win the free pawn. So Anand took, and Maghsoodloo played knight e7. And that's a move I probably wouldn't consider. And knight e7 makes it easier to play d5 because the knight's defending, and it unleashes the latent potential of the rook on c8, which is now actualized potential. We're attacking the knight on c3. So Anand has to save his knight on c3. So Anand plays bishop to d2. Maghsoodloo takes his pawn back. Now, material's even. So if Anand wants to be a pawn ahead, he has to take the pawn on b5. So he does. And Maghsoodloo plays queen b6. And now Maghsoodloo's pressuring the bishop on b5, and he's pressuring the knight on c3. So if it was Parham's move, he would take the knight on c3, and then he would take the bishop on b5. So obviously Anand, one of the greatest tacticians of all time, isn't going to miss that. So Anand played knight a3, defending his bishop, and now white has access to the c4 square. White can play knight c4 or bishop c4 next move. Okay, and black sacks the exchange. It's Maghsoodloo, so it's not surprising. And always sack the exchange. And what's funny is he wins the pawn on e4 because the knight was defending the pawn, but black already sacrificed a pawn. So black's down the exchange for nothing, and white has two passed pawns. But black has a big center, and black has very active pieces. Is the sacrifice sound? I don't know. I would be surprised at black's moves if I was white. Like, knight e7 would surprise me. Rook takes c3 would surprise me. And I would assume, since I'm the exchange up for no pawns, and white doesn't have any pawn structure problems, I don't know. Seems like white should be okay. Okay, the bishop's hanging on c3. So Anand played bishop b2. And Maghsoodloo played d5, which is the whole point. So now, black totally dominates the center. White has no control over the center. Black dominates the center completely. Now the knight on a3 is bad because you can't play knight c4. So I guess Maghsoodloo watches my stream and he hears me say always sack the exchange, so he sacked the exchange. Okay, and I guess if two engines were playing, that white wouldn't lose, but I don't know, maybe black's better, I don't know. Okay, too complicated for me. Anand played bishop e2, because bishop's sitting duck on b5, might as well have it safe. Black played d4. Black is crushing it in the center. White's passed pawns on the queen side are of no consequence because they're on the second and third rank. Frankly, ridiculous. Knight c4. Anand got his knight good. Takes. Bishop takes. White has the two bishops. And black plays knight d6 and says, I have the two pawns. So Maghsoodloo's going to play e4 and f5 and f4 and then make some growling noise. Roar. Okay, those pawns are going to keep pushing. Now, directly, black is threatening the bishop on c4. because if you take back, then your bishop on b2 is hanging. So stop that. Bishop a3. Anand activates his bishop, which wasn't doing anything on b2 except getting blocked. Knife f5. Rook c1. e4. So black totally dominates the center. Black has a passed d pawn. Black's pieces are all perfect, and white's up the exchange. But white's two connected passed pawns are not dangerous. They're not going anywhere. Bishop c5. Anand plays for tricks, but tricks are for kids, and Maghsoodloo's a kid. So obvious idea is if you take it, bishop takes f7 check, followed by rook takes the queen. Okay, so Maghsoodloo has to save his queen, plays queen d8, rook e1. White is putting pressure on black center pawns with as many pieces as possible. Rook e8, breaking the pin. b4, Anand heard me complaining 5 years later that his queenside pawns weren't dangerous, so he's going to push his queenside pawns and make them dangerous. Knight takes, rook takes, getting rid of the two bishops, and now e3. And white is not well placed to defend his king. Black has a knight on f5, which is good for attacking. The queen can go to d5 or g5, h4. Bishop can go to h6. These pawns can start rolling. I can take on f2 and put my knight on e3. Your king is exposed. So black has great compensation for the exchange. Takes on e3. Knight takes e3, threatening the rook on c4. Obviously. And also threatening the queen on d1. So it looks like Maghsoodloo might win his exchange back. So queen a4, nice tactic by Anand. If Maghsoodloo tries to win the rook, then he loses on e8 because Anand played queen a4. So he can't take the rook. Okay, so he played rook e6. Now he's threatening knight takes rook. Rook c1. Queen d5. This stops any back rank shenanigans from white. And it also threatens queen takes g2 mate with advantage. Okay, so again, black sacrificed the exchange, but black's knight on e3 is better than either white rook. Rook's doing nothing. Knight on e3 is a monster. Okay, rook e2, stopping mate. d3, brilliant tactical move, attacking the rook. Anand played rook to d2. If Anand plays rook takes knight, which looks like the obvious move, then I'm assuming black plays bishop d4. I think I'm assuming correctly. I don't see what white does here. What's funny is if white plays rook e1, black plays d2, and the truth hurts. Well, I don't like that for white. Okay, and if you trade, then you're losing your rook, and then my passed pawn is better than your two passed pawns. Also, your king's going to get mated in the corner and back rank mate. Okay, so probably Anand missed d3 because d3 is really tricky. Anand played rook d2, stopping the d pawn from going to d2. Bishop d4 anyway. Black still dominates the center. You can't play rook takes d3 because queen takes g2 is still mate. So he played king h1, put it in h, getting his king away from that bishop. Knight takes g2 because he's Maghsoodloo and he isn't sacrificed in a few moves. Okay, and black's idea is if white takes the knight on g2 with the rook, black's going to play rook e2, threatening queen takes g2 mate. Truth hurts. Also, if white doesn't take the knight on g2, black is going to move the knight away with discovered checkmate. So I don't know what to suggest for white. Black's monster attack. Queen b3. Anand wants to trade queens. I agree with that. That seems like a good idea. Then queen a8, keeping on this diagonal and making sure that white can't play a move like queen b3 again and attack black's queen. White doesn't have any move here that attacks the queen. And this position, I think Anand resigned. Yeah. Okay. So there's two variations to look at. If it's black's move, every knight move is completely winning. It's checkmate, basically. So we can take the knight or we can take the bishop. If we take the bishop, there could be more than one mate, but since I see checkmate, I'm going to play that checkmate. Then you guys on YouTube can say, you had a quicker checkmate. Why didn't you play that one? I didn't see the other checkmate. I just see one checkmate. Knight here, check. Playing rook c6 or queen d5 is hopeless. So king g1. Knight h3 check. White has one legal move. Queen h1 check. White has one legal move. Then mate. Probably other ways for black to win, but that's the one that I saw in 2 seconds. So if I saw it in 2 seconds, that means the player saw it. Okay, so bishop takes d4 is unplayable. The other move is rook takes g2, and after rook e2, I can't help white. I'm a grandmaster, but I got nothing. Queen takes g2 mate is threatened. Play rook g1, I take the rook, and then queen takes g2 mate is threatened. So that's not a good solution. Probably the engine would play queen takes f7 check, and rook f1 check, and stave off mate for 4 or 5 moves. But okay, resigning is a better option. Okay, so after queen a8, Anand resigned. That was a brilliant game. Did you say something, John?
Is there a faster mate with knight e8 or e1? Sorry.
Okay, king g1.
And then, oh, I see. Well, yeah, then, oh, yeah, you're not protected there. Never mind. There. Well, king g1. How are you going to do king g1? You're
because we were analyzing bishop takes bishop.
Right. Oh, right. Okay, that's.
Then I suggested knight f4. And you
yes,
suggested knight e1.
Yeah. All right. All right.
I'm not saying there's not a quicker mate. There might be. That's just the mate that I saw. So if I see it, that means the players see it. I don't see another mate, but that doesn't mean there isn't one. Anyway, the only way to know is to go on YouTube in a week and find out all the mates I missed. Okay, so in this position, Anand resigned. That was an amazing game from Maghsoodloo, beating such a strong opponent and such a famous tactician. And most people won't understand this, but you really want to win more than usual in a team tournament. And you really don't want to lose. Because when you lose, you feel like you let your team down. So Anand's playing board 1 for India, and he loses with white, so he feels extra bad. And then Maghsoodloo is a hero in Iran and his team because he beat Anand with black. 5-time world champion. Okay, that's the only game you need to see to realize how good Maghsoodloo is. I mean, that's crazy. I showed you the best game first. Okay, next game, Maghsoodloo's white. And he's playing another Indian player, Narayanan. Narayanan. I'm good at pronouncing names. And this was played in 2021. And their ratings were similar, but Maghsoodloo was slightly higher rated than his opponent. Okay, Maghsoodloo likes to play the English, which you're going to notice when we finish this lecture. and they played symmetrical. And this game reminds me of Yasser Seirawan, because this is how Seirawan played in the 80s and 90s. He played for B4. Seirawan, when he played the English, always fianchettoed his king bishop, like Maghsoodloo. Then he would play A3, rook B1, B4. Now, I'm not saying it's a Middle Eastern thing, but Seirawan was born in Syria, and he's a hero in the Middle Eastern world in chess, because he was top 10 in the world. His name's Yasser Seirawan, pretty Middle Eastern name. Now, when Yasser travels the world, he has two problems. His name is Yasser Seirawan, so they don't like that at customs. And the second problem is his U.S. passport says born in Syria. They don't like that either. So as Yasser has told me on more than one occasion, when he travels internationally, the truth hurts. They always question him. They're randomly selected to go back and talk to them. When's the last time you were in Syria? Okay, so Maghsoodloo, paying homage because he's Iranian, he plays basically the way Yasser played 30, 40 years ago. Knight f6, breaking the symmetry. Rook b1, white's going to get an advantage on the queen side. And white, very similar to how Seirawan played the English all those years. Bishop f5, attacking the rook, but Maghsoodloo sees that, plays d3. Queen c8. So what Narayanan is doing is saying, if you move your knight to f3, I'm going to play bishop h3 at some point because I have a battery. And more importantly, in this exact position, the rook is on the b pawn. So white was threatening b takes c5. The b pawn's hanging, so black defended it. So it's a dual purpose move, defends the b pawn and also lines up the queen and bishop for a battery. Plays h3 and says, no, you're not going to play bishop h3. Castles b5. Knight goes to d8, defending the b pawn again. Pretty sad knight. e3, he can develop his king knight to e2 that way. e5, plays knight f3 instead. Bishop to d7. I think the reason black played bishop d7, although I'm not a mind reader, but I'm probably right, is black wants to play knight e6 because the knight on d8 doesn't make any sense. And then play knight e6, you're trapping your bishop on f5, so white can play e4 or g4, bishop's trapped. So if black plays bishop d7, then black can play knight e6 safely. And if you showed this position to Yasser today, he would take it with both hands. This is exactly what Yasser was going for when he played the English and pushed his pawns on the queen side. White has an advantage on the queen side. White is defending d4, but white has access to d5. Black doesn't have a lot of counterplay. So Yasser would say white is clearly better here. Okay, knight d2, getting out of the way of the bishop, controlling the white square some more. Knight e6, a4, rook b8, knight d5. White dominates in the center. White can play knight d5, bishop d5, and black can't play knight d4. Black would like to play knight d4, but he can't do it. Queen d8, white castles finally. Knight e8, black wants to play f5, I assume. Bishop b2, black plays f5, I assume correctly. And now f4. f4 prevents black from playing f4, and white has a big space advantage on the queen side with all his pawns on the 4th and 5th rank, and white dominates the d5 square, and black's bishop on d7 sucks. So white has clear advantage here. Takes on f4, Now they do some trades. Takes on f4, giving himself open e-file, which Maghsoodloo wins the game with later. Trade bishops. Knight f6. Maghsoodloo's opponent wants to trade all the pieces off and have a symmetrical pawn structure and claim that it's equal. Knight b3, controlling the d4 square so that black can't put their knight on d4 like white put their knight on d5. You can see which bishop is better. It's not black's. Knight's pinned on e6, so black unpins it. And white plays knight a5, pressuring the pawn on b7, b6, knight c6. White is entering black's camp. Plays rook a8. Doesn't want to give up his white squared bishop, which is defending his knight. White continues on the queen side with a5. White's winning on the queen side in the center, and the king side sort of a draw. White's doubled on the e-file, and black's rook is on a8. Terrible. King f8, defending the rook some more. Queen a1. Maghsoodloo decides we can trade queens, and he'll crash through on the a-file. And then they traded queens, and white crashed through on the a-file. So I guess he was right. And white's going to double rooks and take on b6, and black's in trouble. Black can't let white play rook a2 and take on b6. Black can't move the rook away from a8 and lose on a7. So black's got one choice, which is what he did. Played knight c7, defending his rook. Traded rooks. You can't capture with the rook because your a-pawn's hanging. Capture with the bishop. Now bishop f3. White wants to keep the knight, of course. d5, trying to block it up. And now white's a pawn up, and white's threatening to take on b6, and there's a pin. Plays rook c8. Now in this position, white did something that I would not do, and black resigned. So I guess I'm wrong. I would take this pawn. I don't know why you wouldn't take that pawn, but okay. He did something else and black resigned. So I guess I'm wrong. He traded on b6 and played rook a7. And black is in stalemate. This is a good time to resign because there's no moves. The black rook can't move. There's no safe square. Black bishop can't go to d7. It could go to f7. But if you play bishop f7, I play d6, and then I pre-move d7. Yeah, the truth hurts. The king can't move because knight e7 check wins the rook. The black pawns can't move. You can move your pawns until they can't move anymore. It doesn't do anything. And if it was white's turn to move, white's winning immediately with d6. And I'll give you an example. Play d6, you'll take, and now rook here check wins, and then I play d7. So the only move I didn't discuss was bishop takes, and now taking either way wins, but I'm going to assume he's going to take this way. And then he's threatening d6 with that same deviled egg. Also, he's threatening rook takes h7. Also, his two passed pawns in the center, and white's a pawn up. If you play rook d8, for example, c7, rook c8, d6, and okay, the truth hurts. White's going to take this pawn on b6. Can't stop it. Okay, ridiculous. So maybe Maghsoodloo was right. So Maghsoodloo played rook a7. His opponent resigned. And probably Yasser's never seen this game, but Yasser would be really proud to have white this game. He played exactly like Yasser did in the 80s and 90s. He broke through in the center. He broke through on the queen side. And black was always very passive. Black's pieces for most of the game were on the first and second rank, and you got no counterplay. So basically, black got outclassed this game, and black is only 60 points lower rated. But this is considered one of Parham's best games. So that when you play your best and you have white and you're a better player and your opponent isn't on their game, then it's an embarrassing loss. Black is totally dominated here. Okay, we got time for one more game. It's Parham versus Svidler. Svidler, no slouch. Svidler's won the Russian championships more times than I can count. It's either 8 or 9 times that Svidler's been Russian champion. Svidler's almost always over 2,700. He was this game. This game was played last year in 2024. Okay, and he, again, played some kind of symmetrical English. Played B3 this time, and they played symmetrical. So you're like, this game is boring. I want my money back. Now, the people who paid to watch the lecture live, the people on YouTube, they can have their money back, but the sponsor can't. Okay, D4, taking away the symmetry. Knight A6. Svidler wants to take back with the knight in case captures. If I was white, I would play D5, but I wasn't white. Played knight C3. Black played D5. And now everything in the center can be captured, confusing the presenter, which is me. Knight E5, pinning the D pawn to the bishop. A lot of times, black puts pressure on the knight by playing knight BD7, but the knight's on A6. Knight on A6, I like knight E5 even more. E6, defending the D pawn. Knight B5, unleashing defense of the pawn. The knight controls a lot of key squares. The bishop is active. And if the rook goes to C8 ever, A7 pawn's hanging with tempo. So black says, get your knight out of there. White takes on C5. Black takes back. Then white says, I'll get my knight out of there. So black looks fine out of the opening. Svidler played knight D7 and said, get your other knight out of there. And now all heck broke loose. The game got so complicated, I sat in the corner crying, and Karen's like, what's wrong? And I said, Maghsoodloo Svidler. And she said, oh, okay. She understood everything. Okay, the game gets so complicated, we need to run several engines at the same time to understand the tactics. Knight takes, queen takes, I understand that. Rook C1, I understand that. Takes, knight takes. Now, it looks not very interesting, but you have to realize the knight's pinned, and bishop takes B2 if the knight moves. So it looks like black is going to trade his way to a draw. Maghsoodloo played rook C2, defending his bishop so the knight can move. Black played queen B7, making a battery. And white played knight E4, which looks really good because the knight's going to take on C5. Okay, now the next 6 moves for both sides confuse the audience, which is you. Okay, also I'm confused, but I'll never admit it. Oh wait, I just did. Black played a spectacular move, and then every move was spectacular afterwards. So I'm guessing players got in time trouble at the end. Black played knight E3. So now, every white piece is attacked. And when I say every white piece, What I mean is every white piece. This can be captured, 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 and this can be captured. So I wasn't kidding. And the obvious idea of knight e3 is you unleash the battery. So now if white plays f takes e3, white plays bishop takes e4, white's pawn structure is shattered. Okay, but this kind of complications, that's exactly what Maghsoodloo goes for. He took on c5. Now both queens are hanging, confusing the audience. Knight takes queen, knight takes queen. And if I was black in this position, I would be very confused because you can take every piece. You can take the bishop two different ways. You can take the knight. You can take the bishop on g2. Now, looks like if you take the bishop on b2 and I take the bishop on c6, then white's just a pawn up. So I think it makes sense to play bishop takes g2 because bishop's hanging, and if white takes that bishop, white's just a pawn up. Bishop takes g2. White has three captures: king g2, rook d1, and bishop g7. White chose the most complicated one, bishop takes g7. That way all the pieces are still hanging. Bishop takes f1, always play bishop takes f1. Bishop takes f8, always play bishop f8. Now, if black takes the bishop on f8, white takes the bishop on f1, then white's a pawn ahead. White took that pawn on c5. And so, if you ever wondered in chess what a desperado is, this is a desperado. Instead of giving the bishop away and winning this bishop, he takes the pawn that's defended, and if Maghsoodloo takes back, Svidler takes, and somehow material's equal. I don't know how. But Maghsoodloo has two advantages. He plays bishop h6, and the bishop is fantastic against the black king. Black king is always getting back rank checkmated. More importantly, the back rank knight is trapped. This knight is not trapped. That knight has 1,000 squares. Okay, so material's equal, but because black's king is no good, and because black's knight is no good, white is much better after all those complications. Bishop f3, attacking the knight on b7, knight d6, e5, put it in h, rook d8, rook c7. He says, you're not really attacking my knight because rook c8 is mate. So I'm going to take on f7, I'm going to take on f7, I'm going to take on a7, rook c7 makes sense. Bishop d5, defending the f7 pawn. You can't take on a7 and hope to give back rank mate because black is defending the back rank with the bishop. So play knight b5, attacking the a pawn again, a6, and knight a3. And white says, my rook's on the 7th, my bishop's trapping your king, and your knight is trapped on d1, so I should be winning. Knight b2, trying to get the knight out to d3. Bishop g5, attacking the rook. And then rook to c3, trapping the knight. And this is a funny position because white to move has an immediate win with bishop c1, attacking the knight. The knight goes to d1, then rook d3, wins the knight because the knight's trapped, and it forks the bishop and knight just in case. So black has to do something about bishop c1. So he played bishop e4, so his knight can go to d3. f3, always play f3. He says, I don't want your knight to go to d3, so you're going to move your bishop away from d3, and then I'm going to play bishop c1 and win. Knight d1, attacking the rook. Rook c7. Black takes the pawn on f3. White plays knight c4. And now white's threatening knight d6, which attacks the rook and attacks the f pawn. And you can't defend the f pawn because bishop h6. Then white has a mating attack. So black doesn't want to get mated by knight d6, losing his f pawn. These three pieces are attacking. He plays bishop d5, defending his pawn, knight d6. Rook has to stay on the back rank. King f1, and that's very funny. The knight can never go here. The knight can never go here. The knight can never go, well, certainly can't go to c4. Those squares are defended. And Maghsoodloo says, I'm going to walk over and take your knight. Your knight's trapped. And white's pieces are all fantastic. King g7, here comes attacking the knight. Black counterattacks the bishop. Bishop goes to c1. Knight's trapped. So he plays rook d8 and attacks white's knight. White plays bishop a3. At this position, Svidler can resign, but I assume, since this game was so complicated, that Svidler was in bad time trouble and he missed a tactic. If he saw the tactic, he probably would have resigned, because what he did was silly. The knight on d1's trapped. You can't move it anywhere safe and you can't defend it. But Svidler said, your bishop is defending your knight, so I'll play knight b2. Then if you take my knight, I'll take your knight. And probably Svidler expected something like rook c2, which seems like to me that it's winning, so also good. But Maghsoodloo just took the knight. And then Svidler realized if he takes the knight on d6, white plays bishop takes f6 check, or bishop takes e5 check, and wins the game. So after bishop takes b2, Svidler, who'd been struggling with his knight the last 12 moves of the game, finally lost his knight and ended up resigning. Very complicated game. We need computers to analyze the positions with all the captures and to see how big white's advantage was once the knight was trapped on d1. But it's pretty good for white. So you can see Maghsoodloo is super strong, beating Anand, Narayanan, and Svidler, all 2,700 players, and doing it very tactically. And the second game, he won very positionally because he's 2,700. So he can win any way he likes. Anyway, I'd like to thank our sponsor. If you want to sponsor a lecture, contact Karen. Her name is on the screen now if you're watching on YouTube. And you can sponsor a lecture on whatever topic you like. Our sponsor's anonymous. That's very common. Go Ted Danson. I'll see you guys next time with more weekly lectures. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment. It helps out the channel. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.